What's up, everybody? I'm Phil. That's Sam.
Hey guys, welcome back.
We got the Fat Electrician coming back on the channel, on our channel. He's got a great channel as well, and that's why we keep going back to his channel for all these historical events that he gives us great details on and doesn't hold back at all.
No, I find him to do a very good delivery because it's entertaining and captivating. It keeps your interest, but you get so many little tidbits of information and a lot of like the main facts that you need to understand the story. So I feel like he's a really good balance there.
He does a great job. And we've got America stole a German submarine and stuck it in Chicago. Now, this is, I believe, related to World War II, a U-boat that they apparently initially captured, brought it to Bermuda, and then it ended up in Chicago. So we're going to, I think, go through the details on how that transpired. But it was a big deal, what we were reading about, briefly in our introduction, because it gave insights into the communication process for the Germans, which allowed them to then get a hold of some of those communications without the Germans even realizing it, which is obviously huge.
Which is crazy how you can like capture a U-boat and nobody knows it went missing. But I guess we're going to find out how that happened.
Well, yeah, I would assume they thought it just sunk or something, right? But anyways, we'll get into those details from the Fat Electrician. He'll be able to give us better insights, I'm sure. If you like the video, hit the like button. Go check out his channel as well. And if you're new to our channel, hit the subscribe button for our channel. We appreciate the love. You ready?
I am. Let's do it.
Let's go.
You know what you call the only Type 9C German U-boat left in existence? America's. Today we're talking about the time that America stole an entire German submarine and then stuck it in the middle of Chicago. I mean, when America strategically transferred a piece of equipment to an alternate location. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Warwood Tools, a family-owned business that for over 160 years has been making sledgehammers and axes right out of West Virginia using American 1060 high-carbon steel. And to this day, they still make all their tools using World War II-era drop hammer forging. So if you want some tools that are going to outlast you, I would recommend Warwood Tools, and I'll have them linked in the description down below. Moving on. Okay, important context in case you don't know. During World War II, American supply lines to the European theater were absolutely devastated by German U-boats, aka submarines. These German U-boats are credited with sinking over 2,700 American ships, totaling in over 14 million tons of American ships and supplies that were put at the bottom of the ocean. Because of this, America would form what is known as hunter-killer groups, task forces of American ships who were sent out, and their entire job was to hunt and destroy these enemy submarines. Because that's just how America gets down. We don't believe in self-defense, we believe in self-offense. It's way more efficient. And that's pretty much all the context you need. So, April 4th, 1944, a hunter-killer group known as Task Force 22.3 would set out, engage, and destroy the German U-boat 515. Absolutely everything went according to plan, nothing was out of the ordinary. They hit it with depth charges, critically wounding the submarine, forcing it to surface one last time to allow the crew to escape before the submarine would sink below the ocean waves forever. But it was on this particular day that the American commander Daniel Gallery would take unique notice of the fact that the German submarines always surfaced to allow their crew to escape, and he decided that he was going to do something unprecedented, something that no American sailor had done since 1815. He was going to send out a boarding party and steal that enemy submarine. He immediately puts a plan into action, assembling two separate boarding parties, each to be comprised of one officer and 8 enlisted men. And these 8 enlisted men are going to be the top 8 guys that you would absolutely want on hand to be able to address any problem that could arise with keeping this submarine from sinking to the ocean floor. People like the electrician, the machinist, the boatswain's mate, the torpedo technician, oh, and the photographer. Yeah, one of the 8 people going on the extremely dangerous and important mission is going to be a photographer because, pics or it didn't happen, right? America's about to do some gangster shit. You best believe we're going to designate somebody to stand in the corner with the camera and yell "World Star" while we do it. June 1st, 1944, Task Force 22.3 receives intel that there's an enemy submarine operating off the coast of Africa. That submarine would turn out to be U-boat 505, and they would head to it immediately. And this poor U-boat has absolutely no idea what's coming for it, because at this point in time, this task force is comprised of the flagship and escort carrier, the USS Guadalcanal, as well as 5 destroyer escorts, the USS Pope, the Pillsbury, the Jinx, the Chatelaine, and the Flaherty. And if you don't know what a destroyer escort is, at this point in time, it is a ship that has one job and one job only, and that is to fuck up enemy submarines. Okay, this hunter-killer group is rolling up on this U-boat like Debo on a beach cruiser. Somebody's about to have a bad day, and it's probably not going to be them.
Oh, shit.
June 4th, 1944, after 3 days of chasing down this U-boat, they would finally catch up to it, and the USS Guadalcanal would immediately scramble 2 Grumman F-4F Wildcat fighters as the rest of the destroyer escorts made their way towards the submarine. U-boat 505 was already submerged and underwater, but the Grumman F-4F Wildcat pilots are able to see the long dark shadow of the submarine underneath the water because it's broad daylight. And once they confirm that it is in fact an enemy submarine, the destroyer escorts begin loading their hedgehogs to fire upon it. If you don't know what a hedgehog is, it is the most feared anti-submarine weapon in all of World War II. It is like a fully automatic mortar capable of firing over a wide area. Once these mortars hit the water, they can plunge into the depths of the ocean at 33 feet per second, and as soon as they make impact with anything, they will explode and destroy it. The hedgehogs would detonate early, not scoring a direct hit, but still rocking and damaging the submarine, jamming its propeller and putting out its lights. Quickly realizing they hadn't done enough damage, the destroyer escorts above would begin launching depth charges. The depth charges would rupture the hull of U-boat 505, and the entire submarine would be forced to surface one last time as a hatch would open and all the German sailors would begin flooding out onto its deck and into life rafts. At this point, the American boarding party grabbed their Tommy guns, hopped in their whaling boat, and made their way over to the submarine. They received no resistance from the Germans as they made their way down the hatch into the sub and began working on it to try to save it. Okay, time out. I need to make sure that you fully grasp how ridiculous what these 9 Americans are about to do actually is. Okay, you have a German U-boat that is so critically damaged that the 50 men that have been living on this U-boat, that have been trained on this U-boat has controls in their language and in their units of measurement. And they have decided cumulatively that, hey, this thing is so damaged that we need to run for our lives. And then while they were evacuating, they would also place scuttling charges, which are large explosive devices that detonate, ensuring that the ship sinks so that America can't retrieve it. So not only is the situation so bad that 50 of them can't fix it, but they made the situation worse on their way out. And you now have 9 Americans, one of which is a fucking camera guy, going in there to do what they couldn't pull off. This mission is seemingly impossible and borderline insane, but they do it anyways because America. So they get inside the sub and begin going to work immediately. The torpedo technicians and ordnance officers begin defusing scuttling charges as the electricians go to work at trying to get the bilge pumps back up and running to pump water out of the submarine. And the damage control men and the machinists begin working on plugging holes and getting the motor back up and running. And while all of this is going on, the officer in charge of the American boarding party, Lieutenant Albert David, notices that the submarine is sinking so fast that there is now water pouring into the open hatch on top. And it is at this moment that he has to make a split decision. He either has to get his men out and save their lives, or he has to shut the hatch and give them more time to work. But if they can't pull it off, they are all going to die in that submarine. And without thinking twice, he closes the hatch. A few minutes later, the second boarding party would board U-boat 505, and they would attempt to open the hatch to get inside the submarine and help. But the sinking submarine had created such a powerful vacuum that it was impossible. So they did the next best thing. They got a tow line, tied the U-boat 505 to the USS Guadalcanal, as the USS Guadalcanal began towing the now sinking U-boat. Feeling that they were now moving, the Americans on the inside had an ingenious idea. You see, the U-boat didn't have enough power for anything but lights. They were running entirely on batteries. The reason they didn't have power is because the propeller was jammed, and the propeller was jammed because they couldn't get the motor going again. So what they did was they disconnected the drive shaft between the motor and the propeller, allowing the propeller to free spin in the current of the USS Guadalcanal as it's being towed. This would turn the alternator, generating power and giving the U-boat enough power to activate its bilge pumps and begin pumping water out of it. I cannot...
So smart.
Yeah, that's why they brought the best guys over there to think of something like that, right? You know, what an epic event taking place. I mean, we know obviously it's a huge historical event that happened, but as he was alluding to, you know, you got to make these split decisions, split second decisions.
You don't have the fortunate amount of time to think about it, right?
And it's all started with the individual, I can't remember what his ranking was, but he decided, okay, this time we're going to actually board and try to keep it, right?
Yeah, the lieutenant gallery or whatever.
Nobody since the 1800s had done this. It's over 120 years.
Well, it's also such a risk because it's not something that's ever like, well, I mean, it was done once, like you said before, but in the last time span, like they had no idea what they were doing. They just went and were like, we'll figure it out when we get there.
Well, that was what I didn't think of, right? Is that you go to this boat and all the gauges and everything everything are in a completely different language.
Yeah, different units of measurement.
And he made a great point. Like, they got off the boat and like, this boat is screwed, or this, submarine is screwed. And and this guy's like, no, I think we're going to board it and we're going to try to get this thing running and keep it. What, talk about shooting for the stars.
Yeah,
I mean,
especially with the difference in manpower too, right? Like 50 men were like, not worth it. We're jumping ship.
Right.
Meanwhile, there's not, I think he said, 8 or 9, one of which was the cameraman. So we'll say 7 or 8,
Yeah.
like qualified people.
yeah. So thinking you can pull this off, you got to be pretty ballsy. I mean, kudos to him and the rest of the guys that jumped in there. Obviously, that's my worst nightmare. Honestly, what they're talking about, I'm not a big fan of water.
I was going to say,
guys.
you're not really an ocean explorer to begin with.
I'm much more of a land guy. So that's like my worst nightmare, being stuck in a submarine, even though they're talking about the depth charges and everything. And like, you're in the submarine, you're in the ocean, and now they're trying to basically drop bombs on you in the ocean. And, then you just sink and go to the bottom of the ocean, and that's where you're going to die. Like, it's like my worst nightmare.
Worst case scenario.
But then you have these guys who are now going from the destroyer onto the submarine, and they're like, let's close the hatch. Like, that gives me anxiety just thinking about it.
Like, there's no
Close the
escape.
hatch. There's no coming back
There's no
now.
escape.
But I mean, that's why they're so brave, right? But so wild. And then great thinking by the rest of the crew to tie,
So that
to
has
link
that leverage
to
to be pulled.
to the submarine, because then it can't sink,
Yeah.
obviously, and then it gets them the opportunity to now bring power back onto the submarine, and hopefully, as he's just alluding to, start draining the water. So cool to think about the sequence of events that have taken place to get to this point.
Yeah.
And we're not even close to getting this thing put somewhere in Chicago.
Yeah, still ways to go. But even just the beginning, I feel like that's the most impressive point, to actually be able to get there to the point that they can start moving it and survive inside of it.
Yeah, step 1.
Yeah.
Let's continue. See where we go.
Now as it's being towed. This would turn the alternator, generating power and giving the U-boat enough power to activate its bilge pumps and begin pumping water out of it. I cannot stress to you enough how fucking genius this was to do. This saved all of their lives for sure, and to be able to have the knowledge and wisdom to come up with a solution like that while you're actively fucking dying in a tin can under the ocean is incredible. So things are already looking up, but at a
That's what
minimum,
I'm
they have to
saying.
get that hatch back open so that the first boarding crew can escape if they absolutely need to. So the second boarding crew, with their Tommy guns, proceeds to pluck one of the Germans out of their life raft and persuade him to activate the pressure valve, which is going to equalize the pressure inside and outside the sub, allowing them to open the hatch door. That happens, and the second boarding crew gets inside and also gets to work. And all this is going on, and there's 50 Germans sitting out there in life rafts like, fuck. Like, what do you do in that situation? You have just been outclassed on every conceivable level. Like, you were in combat, they damaged your ship to the point that you couldn't fix it, so then you tried to rage quit and blow up your own ship, and then they're like, no, I've changed my mind. And then they went in there and made it so you couldn't even sink your own ship. At this point, the rest of the task force goes around plucking all the Germans out of their life rafts because they are now prisoners of war, as Commander Gallery comes to the conclusion, fuck it, we're just gonna have to tow this sinking submarine while it's actively sinking all the way to the nearest American port, and we're just gonna have sailors in there working 24/7 around the clock to try to keep it above the waterline. Not a terrible plan, but the only problem is they're like 150 miles off the coast of Africa, and the nearest American port is 2,500 miles away, and if that wasn't bad enough, it's in fucking Bermuda, where the whole triangle thing is. I mean, the disrespect with this is absolutely palpable. Could you imagine being one of these Germans sitting there like, not only are you not allowed to sink your own ship, you're not even allowed to rage quit. The Americans come in, steal your shit, and now they're gonna joyride it through the Bermuda Triangle and not even lose it just to flex on you like that? It's ridiculous. So they get everything buttoned up and they get underway, headed out to Bermuda. At which point, a couple days later, the commander of the German submarine wakes up in the infirmary on the USS Guadalcanal. Apparently, he had been hit in the head and lost consciousness for a number of days. At which point, Commander Gallery comes down to have a conversation with him, and he's like, hey, here's the deal. We stole your sub. We're towing it to the Bermuda Triangle for a joyride. It's gonna be great. The German commander absolutely refuses to believe him. He's like, that's not possible. I had 50 dudes. They weren't able to save that sub. We scuttled it on the way out for insurance. There's no way that you managed to keep that sub from sinking. At which point, Commander Gallery is like, oh, well, Here's all the shit from your office that's distinctly not waterlogged. Also, if you look out the window,
There's
we're
a
towing your
sub
submarine
there.
behind us right now. At which point, the German officer completely loses his shit. He starts crying. He's completely inconsolable. He's like, when my chain of command finds out that this happened, they're going to torture me and then they're going to kill me. Or the other way around. I don't know. This is absolutely terrible. But Commander Gallery, being the cool guy that he is, he's like, hey, buddy, pal, friend, you're going to sit in a nice POW camp for the duration of the war. We're going to win, and by the time you get to go back home, you're not going to have a chain of command, and all of your leadership infrastructure is going to be completely dismantled. I wouldn't worry about it. Didn't really make him feel better, but I thought it was funny. Now, so they're still making their way towards that big triangle thing, but pulling this submarine and keeping it from taking on water is a constant struggle, and it's starting to look like they're not going to be able to keep enough water out of this submarine long enough to get it all the way to Bermuda. So, they start interviewing Germans, trying to find one with technical knowledge that would be willing to help them keep it afloat. And that is when they come across a young German sailor by the name of Felix Ewald, and he would inform them that not only is he not German, he's definitely not a Nazi, and he's certainly not a fan. He was conscripted when the Nazis invaded Poland, and he was basically being forced to be there, and that if America wanted help, he was happy to do so. So he would immediately go to work helping the Americans keep the submarine afloat the entire time as they traveled back to Bermuda. As the remaining German POWs began asking questions, what happened to Felix? What happened to Ewald? Where's Ewald? And they began looking for him every chance they got, searching everywhere they could find him. The Americans had told him that they killed him, but they didn't believe it because they knew he was Polish too. So they just kept looking and looking, scanning everywhere. And this would be the inspiration for the childhood book, Where's Waldo? I'm just kidding, I made that part up. Anyways, with the help of Felix, they managed to tow this submarine all the way to Bermuda. They get it fixed up. It's definitely not going to sink, at which point they get to go in and really start looking at what intel they had managed to gather. And holy shit, there is an up-to-date active Enigma cipher machine on board. This is what the Germans were using to send all their secret military communications, and it could prove absolutely invaluable. They also had a bunch of up-to-date ciphers and a bunch of other documents that were deemed so important that they were printed on water-soluble paper so that if the boat did sink and these documents got wet, they would completely disintegrate and be unrecoverable. It is at this point that the American leadership decides the Germans have to think that this boat went down and everyone died. We cannot let them know that we have this information because now we're going to be able to decode all of their secret transmissions and we don't want them to change the code. So they take U-Boat 505, they actually paint it to look like an American submarine and then start referring to it as the USS Nemo, which if you don't know is Latin for no one. They then take all the German POWs from U-Boat 505, send them to Louisiana, where they are going to be completely segregated from all the other POWs, so nobody knows who they are or where they came from. All the American sailors are then ordered to turn over all of the souvenirs that they gathered out of U-Boat 505 and to shut the fuck up about it. And as far as anyone on the planet needs to be concerned, this U-boat is at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, 150 miles off the coast of Africa. Nobody can know that we have this. Buh! If those Germans weren't allowed to write home through the Red Cross, that's technically a Geneva Convention violation. Buh! First of all, when you're on the winning side, those aren't actually rules, they're more like suggestions.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
Secondly, let's just be honest here. If you were a POW in World War II and the worst thing that happened to you is you weren't allowed to write home while you were being well fed and treated with dignity, you came out on top. Alright, so somehow the United States manages to keep this thing a complete secret until May 7th, 1945, when Germany issues their unconditional surrender. And it is at this point that the smack talking can now commence, because now we are going to take this submarine, you know, the only remaining Type 9C German sub left on the planet, even though they manufactured hundreds, we sunk all of them, except for this one. Now we're going to drive that bitch to Philadelphia and use it to raise funds, and anybody that buys a bunch of war bonds can get a guided tour of this German sub, because a lot of people quit buying war bonds after Germany surrendered because they thought the war was coming to an end and we were still fighting the war in the Pacific against the Japanese, so this was like a huge fundraising opportunity, and that's exactly what they did. They sold a ton of war bonds. As soon as that started slowing down, hey, we'll tow it to another major US city. They towed it up to New York. Then New York bought a bunch of war bonds. And then World War II would finally come to an end when Japan issued their unconditional surrender, and now we've got this German submarine and we don't know what to do with it. So the US government does what the US government do, and they're like, hear me out, what if we shot nuclear bombs at it for science? At which point, Commander Gallery, who's now an admiral, chimes in and is like, no, I stole that thing fair and square, we're keeping it. So he ends up orchestrating a deal with the city of Chicago where the US government will donate the submarine to the city of Chicago as long as the city pays to have it shipped all the way there. And that's exactly what happens. They took
thing's
a
huge.
Type 9C German submarine, the whole thing in one piece, and put it in Chicago, you know, like the major city that's the most inland of any other city in America. It's literally fucking 2 Germanys
That's what I
into
was
America.
thinking.
Yes, that is to scale. An incredible logistical feat is the icing on the cake for one of the most amazing and utterly disrespectful stories to ever come out of World War II. And I'm happy to say that if you would ever like to go see U-Boat 505, you still can, because it is still in Chicago today at the Museum of Science and Industry, where it currently sits as a proud member of the second largest navy on the planet, America's fleet of museum ships. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch at thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang out.
On June 19th, the U-505 was towed into Bermuda, and there remained as a prize of war. One less wolf to hunt.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, he answered a lot of my questions that I was thinking about towards the end there. I was like, for one, why Chicago?
Yeah, of
You
all
know?
places.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, how did we get, from the coastline to Chicago, and why did we pick that location?
Yeah.
And it sounds like it was just because that was one of the cities that was willing to fork out
They
the funds
wanted
for
it.
it, which, has probably paid off because it's been around for so long now that, the tourist dollars that are going to come with it. And
Yeah, well, I think that's probably a better result for it than blowing nuclear bombs towards it.
Yeah, and I was thinking as well, is it still, there to be seen today in Chicago? And he answered that question as well, because I was thinking, well, that'd be a cool thing to go and check out. I've never been to Chicago as it is, but if I ever go to Chicago, that will be on my to-do list 100%, seeing an old school German submarine.
Yeah, that would be really cool to see in person.
Would be very, very cool. And the fact that it's just, they've been able to maintain it for so long. I mean, I don't know what kind of shape it's in, but they put so much effort into transporting it. I imagine it's probably in pretty good shape.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine I think from the visual they showed there, it looks like it's indoors too, right?
Yeah.
So it's not going to, I guess, deteriorate as quickly, probably.
Yeah, not from the weather. Yeah. So pretty wild. I mean, so many different protocols in place as well, right? You have the charges from the Germans that are there to try to prevent them capturing the technology, which the Americans had to disarm, right? That was, something we didn't even talk about or touch on, was the fact that they had to do that.
Yeah.
And then you have, when they captured the communication machine, I can't remember what it was called, but normally it would sink to the bottom, water would make it deteriorate, and therefore that technology would not be usable by the enemy, right? To think about that engineering process, the ingenuity of, making sure it's designed in a way that, so in the off chance that, we have a boat that sinks, nobody else will be able to, send divers in or something to grab that technology.
Get the code.
So there's just so many, little details that make such a big difference in the strategy of war. And one of them was the big decision here by certain members in this crew to decide to capture it and, figure out ways to drag it across. And the other thing I was thinking about is like, these aren't experts, you know what I'm saying? It's not like they've been trained in going to school and, they're not all engineers, you know what I'm saying? Like, they've learned from being a part of the military, I would imagine, because, a lot of this took place because of the World War II. And it wasn't like, you'd had people in the military for a long period of time training to be in the military. A lot of people were just, okay, the World War II is here, I'm going to join the military, or they were drafted into the military. And so that was one of the other things I was thinking about was, these people went over to the submarine, but, who knows what their expertise was like, but they still managed to figure out and solve the problem.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, because he did mention that, in that crew, there was like a person that was, he said, trained on this and trained on that. And there was a person, but it's like, well, how extensive was that training, right? Another thing that I wanted to mention that had a really big contribution to this is that one Polish guy who decided to help them, right? If he didn't make that decision and he kept his mouth shut, maybe in fear of his life or whatever it is from the Germans, then it would have sunk. They basically said it was sinking. They needed somebody to help them to come in who knew the ship and knew how it worked and, I guess like the inner workings of it to be on their side. So that one guy also made a big difference.
Yeah, like I said, the details. The details matter. and small variables are important. So this is really cool. I really enjoyed this one from the Fat Electrician.
Yeah.
I think it was one of his more comedic ones as well.
Yeah.
Usually there's a little bit of comedy in there, but he was dropping the jokes as gems in here as well. So
I think the thing that I like about his videos too is that he'll do a section that's educational and storytelling and go through it, but then he'll almost take a pause and almost put it into context for you so you can understand really what's going on. It's not just like storytelling and education the whole time. It's like he'll stop to be like, okay, I just need to know that you understand the magnitude of this, you know?
yeah. Yeah. And then he does drive it home in a great way, like you said. So if you enjoyed our video, make sure you hit the like button. If you enjoy his videos, make sure you go and subscribe to our channel. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, do that now. If you think you're subscribed, double check. And we got lots of history, military-based videos on the channel now. We've been adding them to our catalog, so you can go and check out other ones that we've done. We've got a playlist of history that's probably popping up right now, which includes some military-based videos as well. Let us know if there's other ones from the Fat Electrician you want us to check out. I think he's got quite a few longer ones. I think some of them are 30 minutes, some of them are 45 minutes. We've been trying to stick to ones that are like 15, 20 minutes long because it generally falls into our category of content. But if you do want us to check out some longer ones and you would be down to join us on those, let us know because we enjoy checking them out. But
I feel like they go by fast too when you're watching them.
They do, yeah, because they're so entertaining, right? So let us know down below in the comment section, guys. Make sure you hit the like button, like I said. Have a great day. We'll see you in our next one.
Thanks for watching.